welcome to all on Zoom as well as on Facebook Live. Hope each one of you is safe and healthy. I'm happy to have all the attendees this Sunday afternoon. Thank you for joining us for today's webinar, Activités pour créer des citoyens du monde, hosted by Indo French Hub and Institut Français Inde, Mumbai. I'm Bijal Menon, a French teacher for last 17 years and also founder of Indo French Hub. Indo French Hub was conceived to facilitate the exchange of two very vibrant cultures in the world, India and France. Towards this goal, we have created a hub of exciting and enriching activities and programs for students, teachers, and just anyone who loves the language, food, films, history, and culture. We conduct teacher training programs in India and France. We screen films through our French Cine Hub and also various immersion programs in France and Pondicherry. At the center of all our programs and activities is a team of qualified educationists, travel enthusiasts, and lovers of French language. We are friends on Facebook and Zoom. As this webinar on Zoom allows only 100 participants live, we also welcome all our participants who are viewing it live on Facebook. It is a great feeling and an overwhelming response to receive 400 plus participants from India as well as abroad. We truly appreciate. Thank you very much. The word intercultural means relating to or involving more than one culture. As French professionals and teachers, I'm sure we all agree that we come across the intercultural aspect more often. We also want our students to know about it, learn the language better, and be a true global citizen. We are glad to have with us Mr. Philippe Guillien, attaché de coopération pour la français, Institut Français Inde à Bombay. Welcome, Philippe.
Bonjour, bonjour Bijal. Bonjour à tous les participants.
Merci, Philippe. And I would like to welcome also a resource person, Mme Dolon Gupta. Welcome, ma'am.
Thank you, Bijal. Thank you.
Our pleasure, ma'am. Thank you for accepting our invitation, ma'am. Thank you so much. Just a little housekeeping before we get started. If you have any questions during the presentation related to the topic the ma'am is handling, please type it in the Q&A section in the Zoom. And those on Facebook Live can put it in the comment section and we'll handle the Q&A section at the end of our program, at the end of the presentation. Those on Zoom, we are going to enable the chat window when a resource person was going to ask you a few questions. Please use the chat window to reply to her at that moment. Thank you so much. Now I request Philip to share his views and introduce the topic. Over to you, Philip.
Thank you. Up. Voilà, j'espère que tout le monde peut voir la présentation. Je vous prie d'excuser ce petit retard. Tout va bien?
Would you need me to assist you, Philip?
Non? Est-ce que vous voyez ma présentation?
Ah oui. But you'll have to do it on full screen.
OK.
Perfect.
Bien. Donc, je vais prendre quelques minutes pour introduire le sujet de notre webinaire d'aujourd'hui. Et si vous me permettez, je parlerai en français, mais les diapositives seront en anglais. Donc, cadre européen commun pour les langues, de référence pour les langues, et enseignement des langues interculturelles. Enseignement interculturel des langues. L'origine, en fait, de cette approche interculturelle de l'enseignement des langues, c'est le Conseil de l'Europe. Ce sont les travaux du Conseil de l'Europe qui ont affirmé que la connaissance des langues, elle n'est pas simplement bonne pour le travail, pour les voyages ou pour partager de l'information. C'est beaucoup plus que ça. L'apprentissage des langues étrangères permet le développement personnel. Et c'est ce qui a amené les chercheurs qui ont été associés aux travaux du Conseil de l'Europe à développer cette méthode d'enseignement des langues interculturelles. L'enseignement des langues interculturelles peut se pratiquer en dehors du système éducatif. Et en fait, il doit favoriser de véritables rencontres interculturelles que l'on peut organiser par exemple, l'organisation d'échanges scolaires entre la France et l'Inde. Ces échanges se développent de plus en plus. Chaque année, nous avons de plus en plus d'écoles qui participent à ces échanges. Peut se développer également par simplement des contacts sur Internet, et c'est le cas en ce moment puisque les circonstances nous amènent à favoriser la communication par Internet, ou bien par la participation à des travaux, à des projets locaux ou internationaux. L'apprentissage des langues étrangères, c'est un moyen d'expérimenter de manière concrète et directe l'altérité, puisque dès le début de l'apprentissage, l'apprenant est confronté à des sons et à des mots qui lui sont étrangers. C'est aussi, évidemment, un moyen d'interagir avec des sociétés contemporaines. Cet apprentissage des langues, il nécessite une implication personnelle profonde. Par exemple, pour les personnes qui décident de partir vivre ou étudier à l'étranger et qui ont le désir de s'adapter à une nouvelle culture, à un nouveau contexte. Le cadre européen commun pour les langues en Europe fait la promotion d'une compétence existentielle et le développement d'une personnalité interculturelle. L'éducation interculturelle, elle recherche à développer des attitudes ouvertes, proactives, réfléchies et critiques, afin d'appréhender de manière positive et profitable le contact avec l'autre. Elle vise à développer la curiosité pour la découverte et la gestion personnelle de la diversité culturelle, parce qu'elle vise également à amoindrir l'ego de l'apprenant et les attitudes ethnocentriques. Cet apprentissage interculturel des langues cherche à influencer les attitudes et par extension les croyances et les valeurs afin d'encourager des formes variées d'acceptation de l'altérité au plan émotionnel et évidemment en accord avec la Déclaration universelle des droits de l'homme. Donc, sur cette diapositive, vous pouvez voir quelles sont un petit peu les règles qui ont été définies par le Conseil de l'Europe en 2013, les règles ou plutôt les recommandations définies par le Conseil de l'Europe en 2013 pour développer la compétence interculturelle au travers de l'éducation et de l'apprentissage des langues étrangères. Première règle, respecter les gens d'autres cultures, les peuples qui appartiennent à des cultures différentes. Être ouvert, être curieux au sujet de ces peuples provenant de cultures différentes. Être ouvert à l'apprentissage d'autres cultures, à la découverte d'autres cultures. Avoir la volonté de se poser des questions sur ce que l'on considère comme acquis, comme normal dans sa propre culture, dans sa propre expérience. Avoir également la volonté d'entrer en empathie avec les personnes qui ont des origines culturelles différentes. Avoir également la volonté de suspendre tout jugement. Avoir aussi la volonté de tolérer l'ambiguïté et l'incertitude. Enfin, la volonté de coopérer avec des individus de cultures différentes et la valorisation du pluralisme de vues et de pratiques. Cela passe par développer des attitudes. Je reprends donc développer la curiosité et l'acceptation consciente de l'altérité. Des compétences. Qu'est-ce qu'une compétence? Une compétence, c'est une capacité acquise que l'on peut observer, en général, au travers de savoir-faire et au cours d'activités. Donc, dans une perspective interculturelle, on va chercher à développer la compétence de l'apprenant pour qu'il s'exprime à l'oral d'une manière réfléchie sur ce sujet de l'altérité. C'est ce que l'on peut considérer comme la forme la plus basique de la communication interculturelle. Par exemple, au niveau A1, au niveau A2 ou au niveau B1, souvent les apprenants, ils vont penser qu'ils ne sont pas capables d'exprimer ce qu'ils ressentent ou ce qu'ils pensent en utilisant la langue qu'ils apprennent. Et donc, il faudra organiser des séances de verbalisation, peut-être sous la forme de débats, qui vont aider les apprenants à apprendre ce que c'est que la tolérance linguistique et à l'opposer à la violence verbale. Cette tolérance linguistique, c'est la base de toute existence démocratique. La connaissance. La connaissance d'une société, d'une culture, elle est en évolution permanente et elle est diverse. Il faut donc apprendre aux apprenants à rechercher des sources d'informations qui soient évidemment les plus fiables possibles afin d'élargir leur connaissance, qui est souvent restreinte au niveau, qui se contente souvent, des stéréotypes. Voilà. Le français avec sa baguette de pain, la tour Eiffel, etc., etc. Les professeurs de langue et les auteurs de manuels en particulier doivent être particulièrement attentifs à l'information qu'ils fournissent sur une culture donnée. Et ils doivent chercher à éviter la simplification. Car si l'on simplifie trop l'approche d'une langue et d'une culture, on va se contenter d'événements amusants, de célébrations, d'événements en lien avec des traditions, et de généralités. En fait, appréhender une culture, même à un niveau élémentaire, appréhender une langue, c'est déjà chercher à rentrer dans l'altérité, dans quelque chose d'inconnu, et donc à ne pas rester à un niveau superficiel. Donc, quelles activités proposer pour favoriser cet apprentissage interculturel des langues? Eh bien, des rencontres avec l'autre qui sont autant d'occasions de découverte et d'apport de connaissances et d'informations. Mais ces rencontres, elles doivent donner lieu à des réactions. Et ces réactions, il faut que les apprenants, très tôt, apprennent à les exprimer verbalement, afin qu'on puisse étudier ensemble avec les autres les attitudes de la culture cible. Il faut également, pour le professeur, apprendre à gérer les réactions des apprenants lors de rencontres avec une autre culture par le biais de ces verbalisations les amener à s'exprimer, éventuellement à exprimer les stéréotypes qu'ils ont sur cette culture pour mieux ensuite les renverser éventuellement ou au moins les modifier. Donc ces activités, elles comprennent 3 aspects. Un accès à une connaissance, on va dire, sociétale, le développement de compétences d'interprétation des comportements, des habitudes de l'autre, et elles doivent amener l'apprenant à avoir des attitudes plus complexes face à l'autre, à se poser les bonnes questions et à faire preuve de tolérance et d'ouverture. Voilà, je vais terminer avec un exemple aussi, c'est que l'apprentissage interculturel des langues est étroitement lié avec l'intercompréhension des langues romanes. Et j'ai beaucoup travaillé dans ce domaine lorsque j'étais en Espagne avec mes collègues portugais et italiens et roumains. Et donc, nous avions travaillé dans le cadre d'un projet européen au développement d'une méthode d'apprentissage de 5 langues romanes, le français, l'espagnol, le portugais, l'italien et le roumain, à un niveau relativement simple, au niveau A2, mais qui était très utile et très demandé en Europe, notamment par les journalistes, par les experts européens qui ne recherchent pas une connaissance approfondie des langues, mais qui veulent avoir une connaissance suffisante pour pouvoir échanger et surtout aborder un peu les différences culturelles. Voilà, je laisse cette diapositive avec quelques références qui m'ont été utiles pour cette présentation et je laisse la parole à Dolon. Merci à tous.
Thank you so much, Philip. It's always a pleasure to hear from experts like you. Thank you so much. All the participants on Zoom as well as Facebook Live, we welcome you, those who have joined a bit late. And we'll be sharing all the presentations made by Philip as well as Dolon Gupta tomorrow on email to you, so do not worry on that part. Okay, okay. Moving on to our resource person. Welcome, Dolon ma'am. So Dolon ma'am, she's been a teacher of French who has worked at Alliance Française of Calcutta and Delhi, as well as the universities of Calcutta and Mumbai. With the transition into the corporate space in 2012, she has broadened the scope of work to include integration projects of multilingual and multicultural teams. She was the global head of the function Culture and Language Initiatives, where the primary task was providing training solutions to enhance collaboration and productivity. At present, an independent business consultant specializing in intercultural communication and management, acquisition and natural languages and soft skills. So we have with us an extremely qualified resource person, and we as teachers have always been looking for what are the other career options. And Dolon ma'am, I think, is the best example who would tell us how to go about it. Over to you, Dolon ma'am.
Thank you, Bijal. I'll just get the slide, just a minute. Just wanted to check, is my screen visible to everyone?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. Bonjour à tous, ceux qui sont à Zoom avec nous, ainsi que ceux qui sont à Facebook avec nous. Et merci beaucoup, Philippe. C'était une très belle introduction. Et moi, je n'ai pas beaucoup à dire parce que vous avez déjà introduit le sujet. Donc, je continue. Ce qu'on va faire aujourd'hui, c'est d'abord, qu'est-ce que c'est la communication interculturelle? Quelle est la petite différence entre cross-cultural studies et intercultural communication? Que sont ces attributs qui sont critiques au XXIe siècle? Et puis, nous allons passer aux pratiques dans les salles de classe. Quel type d'activité on peut utiliser, comment adapter les activités pour que ce soit possible dans les cours de niveau 1.1 ainsi que les cours de niveau C2 et comment on peut adapter ces activités pour développer les attributs critiques du 21e siècle. Et puis, il y aura des questions et des réponses. Donc, à la fin de cette session, ce que vous saurez, c'est pourquoi la communication interculturelle, c'est essentiel aujourd'hui, et aussi comment vous allez incorporer la communication interculturelle dans les salles de classe. And during the webinar, I will be using French as well as English, so that there will be some instructions so that it's absolutely clear to everyone, because there will be a lot of activities where I will request all of you to put your responses into the chat box at any point of time during those activities. If there is something that you would like me to switch or it's not clear, you can put it into the chat box at a later point of time. Now, before we begin, there will be a short poll that we will conduct. There will be 2 questions in that poll, so please respond to both the questions. The second question will have 4 options. You may need to scroll down a bit, so do respond to both the questions in the poll before we begin the webinar. We'll share the poll now.
All the participants on Zoom, you can vote for the polling session. There's one more question, you'll have to scroll it.
Yes, the first question is, at what level are the majority of your students? You may have people at A1 as well as C2, but what is the majority amount? And the second one is, how many of them do you think have already taken up French as a profession, in case you have been teaching for many years? Or how many do you see that there is a possibility that they will take on French as their core subject in their studies, or maybe as a profession later on? I mean, that would be a guess, but still, that's the second question. And it would be an approximate guess in the percentage. And once most of you have responded, we will be closing the poll. Should we go for the result?
We are just about to close the poll. If anyone yet to reply or vote on the poll, or else we move ahead. We have already received 80% response. That's great. Great. We would like to share the results of the poll.
Okay, the maximum we see is A2, followed by 1, then we have B1, then we have B2. That is for the majority of your students. Great. And then how many of them want to take up French as their core profession? It's a pretty small number. The maximum now response is 40 to 60%. You know, that's a very big number. That's a very big number, because I was expecting the opposite. And next we will say it was 60 to 80%. Then, no, sorry, less than 40% was the first. Sorry, my bad. Less than 40. That's the most common thing that we find. And I'm going to come back to this. I'm going to come back to this point that just because people don't take it up as their profession, does that mean we don't teach them? It's quite the contrary. C'est tout à fait le contraire. On va voir comment le français est si important. Right, so we'll move on to we'll close the results now and move on to the next slide. Voilà. Je voudrais partager mon expérience quand j'ai commencé à enseigner pendant les années 80. That is, I started teaching in the 1980s, where when I asked my students, why are you learning French? For most of them, the answer was, we want to learn the language. C'était l'amour pour la langue française. Donc, auparavant, c'était la destination française. On apprenait le français pour le français. Mais, petit à petit, beaucoup a changé. Et ce sera intéressant à noter que during the 90s, the European Union happened. Globalization in India happened. And it so happened that I had taken a short break of about 5 years in my teaching. And when I came back to teaching about the late 1990s, quand j'ai posé la même question, que pourquoi est-ce que vous apprenez le français, la réponse n'était plus que parce que c'est une belle langue, c'est une belle culture, j'aime beaucoup le français, c'est la mode, c'est la cuisine, c'est la beauté. Non, ce n'était pas la raison pour laquelle il apprenait le français. Il apprenait le français pour des raisons d'affaires, pour immigration, pour devenir plus mondial, on disait. Parce qu'on voudrait avoir, le français était devenu comme un véhicule à travers which would just take them into the world. On voudrait voir le monde à travers la fenêtre. Et cette fenêtre s'appelait le français. Donc, le français était devenu le train. Ce n'était plus la destination, c'était le train. Donc, les enfants du français, ce n'était plus alors les enfants de la patrie. C'est un monde aujourd'hui interconnecté. C'est la mondialisation, l'âge de mondialisation, et nous ne sommes plus seulement les citoyens d'un pays. Nous sommes devenus les citoyens du monde. Et les réponses de mes élèves à cette époque-là me disaient clairement que ce n'était plus les apprenants qui voudraient apprendre seulement le français, mais ils voudraient, c'était devenu, it was like a stepping board into the world. Next, how does this stepping board into the world connect with French? Yes, how does it connect French or another foreign language? But we know that the maximum number of speakers in the world, apart from English, is French. And with these two languages, you can go to any corner of the world and you'll be comfortable. And for me personally, except for my visit to Japan, where neither my French nor my English worked, I have been able to get along in any country in the world knowing French and English, even if it was not a technically French-speaking country. Et que sont ces compétences du 21e siècle? On parle d'analyse critique, créativité, creativity, cognitive flexibility, emotional intelligence, decision-making, problem-solving, and there are two very important skills, collaboration, communication. Et quand on parle de la collaboration et de la communication, c'est tout à fait, on parle des langues. Et dès qu'on parle de la langue, quelle est la différence entre la langue et la communication? Pour la langue, c'est une compétence que vous pouvez acquérir et vous pouvez rester chez vous. Mais pour la communication, vous ne pouvez pas acquérir la communication toute seule. Vous avez besoin de quelqu'un à qui il faut parler, à qui il faut écrire. So communication necessarily means there is another person at the receiving end of what you're saying, or you are at the receiving end of what somebody else is saying. So that is the main difference between language and communication. And now, the most important thing that is happening, that has happened in the 21st century is this other person. Who is this other person? With technology, this other person could be in any part of the world. You could be sitting in one corner of the world, in your little village somewhere, but you could be speaking to anywhere in the world. So this other person could be anywhere. Donc, la communication, c'est pour la collaboration, pour collaborer, pour faire quelque chose ensemble. And to tie this up to what the World Economic Forum Future of Jobs reports 2018, it says, being aware of others' reactions and why they react as they do. Now, who are these others? These are the people at the receiving end of our communication. And we have to understand why they react as they do. And where culture comes in. Parce que nous allons nous adresser aux gens qui sont peut-être en France, peut-être au Canada, peut-être au Congo, peut-être au Vietnam, peut-être aux États-Unis, on ne sait où, dans un coin du monde. Et donc, mais nous devons être prêts pour collaborer et communiquer avec ces gens. Maintenant, quand on sait que quand on voyage dans un autre pays, quand on va à un autre pays, il y a certaines choses qu'il faut savoir. Et là, qu'est-ce qu'il faut savoir? Il y a des indices visibles, mais beaucoup plus importants, ce sont les indices invisibles. Indices visibles, language, body language, clothes, the way people look, color of their skin, the type of hair, the build, and our way, with French, we will say baguette, tour Eiffel, beret, or there are certain things that which are visible. But c'est la culture invisible. Ça veut dire la façon de penser, les attitudes, pourquoi ils font ce qu'ils font. Ça veut dire les valeurs sociales, les valeurs politiques, les valeurs économiques. Ce ne sont pas visibles, ce sont invisibles. Et ce sont ces valeurs qu'il faut comprendre pour bien communiquer. And that is where intercultural communication steps into this invisible part of culture. The visible part is the easy part. We will know, okay, this is the kind of food that we are supposed to eat. This is the kind of clothes we are supposed to wear in that weather. And even that requires knowledge. When somebody is going to France, one has to know a bit of the language. One has to know how to conduct, what clothes to wear or what to expect. That is absolutely essential. But when we talk of communication interculturelle, it doesn't end there, because in the culture visible, and this is something Philippe mentioned, that we risk stereotypes. What is a French person? Will have a baguette under his arm and will have a beret and he will walk down. No, that is not. So visible, culture visible is the risk of stereotyping. And that is where we need to go below the surface into the invisible. And that is what intercultural communication deals with, going below that surface. Now, before I move to the next slide, I wanted to tell you something, that during this presentation, there are going to be a couple of slides, which I'm going to display for about half a minute and move on. You have to just notice and read through that and make a note of them. I'm going to ask you some question on it at the end of the presentation, okay? So be prepared. There's nothing to put into the chat box. Just observe and note the next slide that I'm going to show you. This is the one. Okay, I'm moving to the next one. Bon, quand vous voyez cet écran, quelque chose ne va pas. OK? Ça, c'est la culture visible. C'est tout à fait visible. Avec ce geste physique, on n'associe pas vraiment un bonjour, on associe un namasté. Et tout à fait le contraire. Avec ça, on associe un bonjour. On ne veut pas dire que la culture visible n'est pas importante. C'est tout à fait importante. Quand vous rencontrez quelqu'un, when you meet a person who is, or who comes from France, you, for example, it's Monsieur Philippe Guillon. You will not say Monsieur Philippe. Like in India, we would say Mr. Philip. But for a French person, you would not say Monsieur Philippe, you would say Monsieur Guillon. Similarly, there will be certain kinds of body language. When a French person counts, they don't, in India, we often go like this. 1, 2, 3, 4, or 1, 2, 3, 4. Mais pour un Français, c'est 1, 2, 3, 4. Donc, ça va changer. The body language changes. La langue corporelle change. Quand on change de culture, on change la façon dont vous vous comportez. Ça, ce sont les choses plus faciles, mais ce sont importants. So we have to know that as well. So I'm not saying the entire focus goes into the invisible part. The visible part is also important. And pour nous, les professeurs de langue, c'est tout à fait important d'introduire ces particularités des Français aux étudiants, aux apprenants. Mais c'est aussi important d'introduire la partie invisible aux apprenants de français. And for that, I wanted to quickly show you where does intercultural communication come in and where does that move into the language space. Some of you may have heard of Edward T. Hall, Silent Language. Ça, c'était le premier document de la communication interculturelle. This is the first document that we call intercultural, it's an intercultural document, but Edward T. Hall was not he didn't call himself an intercultural communicator. He was a language teacher, and he was teaching at the Foreign Services Department in the US during the Cold War. And what he had noticed was that diplomats from Russia were learning the local language when they went to other countries, while diplomats from the US did not know the local languages, and they were facing a bit of a problem. And hence he decided that there is something more that I need to teach them, not just the language of the local language that they visit, they have to know something more. And this was the something more, what comes as the culture invisible. And his entire book is this, called The Silent Language. And this was a bestseller. And this was published in 1959. By the time the people start taking notes, the first course in an American university started in 1969, around 68, 69. And by the time it developed into a full-fledged subject, it was in the 1980s. In the 1980s, something else also happened. That is the cross-cultural studies. Many of you would have heard of this name, Geert Hofstede. And he did a very interesting study. He got the cultural dimensions of countries. I'm not going to go into this in detail at all because this is, this itself needs an hour. But just to show you what kinds of studies were happening. He developed initially five criteria, then moved into 7 criteria on which, and he measured them and he showed the differences. If we compare France and India, here, okay, a little bit of a difference, here a big difference, and uncertainty about another big difference. So I'm not going into what these criteria are. Anyone who is interested, you can go into that website, Hofstede Studies, and you can go into Edward T. Hall and you can see what this is all about. But what I want to say is there is country-specific study going on, and this is in the 80s. It's an important date because after that, it's in the 90s that globalization starts, European Union starts. and the Conseil d'Europe, they start with the CEFR. And the CEFR, the first book was published in 2001, where one had become aware of knowing multiple languages, bilingualism. And it's an interesting point to make. All the 21st century skills that we are talking about, they're supposed to be placed in the frontal lobe of our brain, which is the seat of executive functions, apparently. And we as language teachers, apparently we are developing that. We are brain coaches in a certain way, because the moment you are bilingual, you develop that frontal cortex. So we are automatically developing the we are developing the 21st century skills. However, that is not our main area. Our main area is to focus on language and to develop intercultural communication. So what I'm going to do next is, nous allons faire une activité. OK? C'est une petite activité de 5 minutes et je vais vous demander, vous répondez dans le chat. Answer in the chat box and match the columns. Is it 1A, 2C, 3B? Just match the columns, answer in the chat box. Vous répondez.
We request all our participants on Zoom to reply on the chat window. Use the chat window to reply, please.
And please don't worry about mistakes. That's the first thing as teachers we have to be very comfortable with. We need to make mistakes. If we don't make mistakes, we won't learn. And that's something we need to encourage in our own classes as well. So make mistakes. That's the fun of it.
We also request our Facebook Live participants to reply on the comment section.
1C is coming in, 2B, then we have 3, some are saying 3C, 3B. So all kinds of responses are coming in, okay? Great, great. Now this is going to be the interesting part, because if we go by simple knowledge base, by the studies of Hofstede studies, then les réponses correctes sont 1C, 2A, 3B. Bon, je vais venir plus tard à ça, mais ce sont des types d'activités que vous pouvez utiliser comme pause café. Quand vous faites yes, Bija?
Ma'am, could you please repeat the answers, please, for our Facebook Live participants?
The answers are 1C, 2A, 3B.
Thank you.
Now, can we say that, and now why? So this can be pendant un cours, vous faites une activité et pendant 5 minutes, vous dites que voilà, une petite activité. Pour 5 minutes, vous faites cette petite activité. Si vous êtes à niveau A1, c'est possible que vous préparez les questions en anglais et vous préparez simplement ABC en français parce qu'ils savent déjà la nationalité. Donc, vous pratiquez la nationalité. S'ils sont à A2, vous pouvez préparer les questions en français. Si ils sont déjà à B1, vous pouvez avoir même une petite discussion en français. Mais A1 et A2, la discussion, c'est mieux en anglais parce que sinon, on ne peut pas vraiment s'exprimer en français à ce niveau-là. Mais c'est important de suivre ces réponses avec une petite discussion. parce que ça évoque la curiosité. Mais pourquoi est-ce qu'il ferme les yeux? Mais pourquoi, quelle est la différence entre un petit c'est bien, c'est une excellente idée, je pense que c'est long. Donc, quand vous étudiez les différents types de culture, vous verrez que normalement, what happens is, for the Japanese, one says that when somebody says something, often a Japanese person will close her eyes. She or he will close their eyes because that is a mark of respect. That shows that you've said something important and it is worth a thought. So I shut my eyes and think about it. So the question was, qu'est-ce que vous en pensez? So what do you think? What is your opinion? The moment the what is your opinion comes, the person shuts their eyes and thinks. While for an American, silence is a no-no. For them, silence means, I need to, the time is money. So immediately the response comes. So you'll notice, and on répond immédiatement. And usually one finds Americans a little more articulate with longer sentences than the Finnish. Hence, je pense que c'est une excellente idée. While the third one, Finnish are very well known, les Finnois are very well known for very brief responses. So for them, it's completely, c'est bien, oui, okay, no, finished. Now, when we are doing this, are we not stereotyping? Yes, we are, but we'll come to that later. However, does that mean that we don't get to know this? No, we have to know this too. So, pendant la pause café, utilisez les petits 5 minutes ici ou là pour lancer des petites activités comme ça à n'importe quel niveau. Et what you're doing now is you're opening them into something beyond just the French world. It's a larger world with nationalities. A similar post-café exercise, but I'm not going to go to it. On dit, un Français dit, garçon, gardez la monnaie. Au Japon, again, do a match the columns. I'm not going to ask you for responses. The next one, I will be asking you for responses. So don't give responses, yeah? We have au Japon, en France, en Belgique, et vous utilisez encore cette activité de la même façon, peut-être écrivez ces phrases en anglais, simplement vous écrivez les pays en français, parce que même à niveau 1, on dit au Japon, en France, en Belgique, all that happens, et à un niveau plus élevé, peut-être vous avez déjà introduit les adjectifs, donc insulté, surpris, content, mais, or these little words, depending on the level, you can adjust it. But what is most important is, what is it a trigger for? Again, a trigger for a bit of curiosity that why is this person going to be insulted? It is in Japan. The answer is in Japan, you should never tip. While in France, it is very accepted. So of course they're happy, content mais pas surpris because it's accepted. While in Belgique, it's usually included in the service tax. So they would be surprised that why are you tipping? But of course they're happy. So with these little things, it's like connaissance. This is something Philippe had mentioned in his slides also. So there are two kinds of activities that we can talk about. One is activities that bring in knowledge of the world. And second type is activity that brings in a worldview. So we are still at the knowledge level. We'll go to the next activity. Please use the chat box for this. That is, I would ask you to put in marks in the chat box out of 5. Quand si vous rencontrez votre collègue après les vacances de Noël, écrivez un petit dialogue, 4 répliques. And this is a written piece. Utilisez les critères, vocabulaire, and I'm giving you the criteria on which you have to mark. Vocabulaire, grammaire. These are the aspects linguistique. Give a mark on the aspect linguistique. How much would you mark this person out of 5?
We request all the participants on Zoom to use the chat window to reply. You have to mark out of 5. Also, we request all our participants on Facebook to use the comment section to give the marks out of 5 for this small dialogue.
And please remember the criteria. You're marking on grammar, vocabulary. Three, 4, 5, 3, 3. Well, I think some are pretty strict. 2, really, I wouldn't like to be your students. No way. Because I barely see any mistakes over here in grammar. Very few mistakes. Okay, I'm sorry, I should have given the level. Suppose it's an A1 or even an A2. I would more go with the 4 or so. And okay, even 5, 1 or 2 mistakes, so maybe 4.5. Okay, now, I think I know why some of you gave 3. You have your chance now. This is a pretty good one where grammar and vocabulary is concerned. Now, again, out of 5, say, vous parlez en français. Est-ce que c'est bon? You're talking to a person of French origin, someone from France. Is this something that, is this dialogue all right? There is something wrong in this dialogue. Now give marks for that. What is, would you be saying this? If you said this, what would the reaction of the person in the French person be? If the person would be extremely happy with this conversation, give 5. If the person would be very unhappy, give 0. And if you feel discomfort level, 2.5. Okay, now we see 1, 3, 3, 1.5. Some have given 4, 2, 2. I agree with a low range. I agree with those who have given 2 or 3. The reason being here, I think that is the reason you have given lower marks too, is that in France, you would never say avec votre famille. It's accepted in India. Si vous allez au Maroc, ça va. Si vous allez peut-être au Brésil, ça va. Si vous allez au certains pays, ça va. Mais en France, ça ne va pas. Au Canada, ça ne va pas. Dans la plupart des pays européens, ça ne va pas. Vous ne pouvez pas poser cette question avec votre famille. Now, this is where we are moving away from language into appropriate communication. Donc, it is no longer, the earlier exercises I showed you were knowledge exercises. This one is application of that knowledge, which is more than baguette, beret, tour Eiffel. That is, how should you do small talk with a French person? And that is the difference between communication and communication interculturelle. This is communication, okay, but it is not communication interculturelle, right? Now, we have another savez-vous coming up, 30 seconds. A quick look, I'm not going to spend much time on this. Earlier studies we had seen, it was country specific. Mais avec la globalisation, on ne peut plus restreindre d'une personne à son pays. Quelqu'un est né en Inde, qui a étudié aux États-Unis, qui a travaillé en Norvège, dont l'époux est peut-être chinois. Donc, comment est-ce qu'on va placer cette personne? How are we going to study a person who's just been all over the world? Or how are we going to really say this person is who's interacting with people all over the world? That is why today cultural studies are changing from country-specific dimensions, like we had seen in Hofstede, into personality traits, which are dominant in a certain country, less dominant, but cultural studies are changing. And that is where the second type of activity comes in. Philip had pointed it out in his thing also, which was about interpretational competencies, complexity of attitude. So our next activity, I'm going to ask you to use the chat box again for our next activity. So we are moving into this, how does one open minds? On a parlé de la connaissance, on a parlé comment différencier entre la communication et la communication interculturelle. Maintenant, comment être prêt pour un monde qui est tout à fait interconnecté, où vous allez rencontrer tout type de personnes et vous ne savez pas en avance quel type de personnes vous allez rencontrer. Vous pouvez aller en France, mais vous n'avez pas de garantie que vous allez rencontrer un Français typique, parce qu'il n'y a pas de Français typique, il n'y a pas de Français, il n'y a pas d'Indien typique, il n'y a pas des gens typiques. OK? Maintenant, lisez ça, and I want you to read this and put in one word as your reaction. You have received this letter. Maybe you're a parent, or imagine if you're not a parent, maybe your parents have received it. And how do you feel about the person who sent you that letter? One word. How do you feel about the person who sent you this letter? I'll just say this in English also. Your daughter, something like, your daughter is evil, underhand. She has an ugly mind behind that apparently innocent face. Unfortunately for us, our son is finds her beautiful and is in love with her beauty. And I'm warning you, control your daughter, ask her to stay away. Otherwise, the consequences will be disastrous. You've received a letter. What is your feeling? How do you feel about the person who sent you this letter? Just one word. Des yeux dégueulasses, horribles, colère, impoli. Il est impoli.
We also have our Facebook participants putting up replies for you, ma'am. We have people who have written terrible, maladresse.
Terrible. So I'm talking about your feelings. Impoli, okay, that person is judgmental, triste, protecteur, menteur, sensible. Oh, it may be. Okay. Orthodox, colère. So whatever it is, it's not a very pleasant feeling. Now, I'm going to change, and you're going to see another slide, and I'm going to ask you the same question. What do you feel? Okay. Now, same letter hasn't changed, but you know something new. C'était le père de Roméo qui a écrit cette lettre au père de Juliette. Maintenant, what do you think of Romeo's father? One word. What do you think of Romeo's father? Votre opinion? Choqué, très fâché, triste. Biased, inquiet. Same, it's quite possible, same. Anxious, judgmental, autoritaire. So again, something, so what do you think about Romeo's father? Similar, negative reactions. I'm going to change this. And I'm going to ask you again the same question. What do you feel about Romeo's father? Okay, I'm going to change this. Before Romeo's father wrote this letter, il avait reçu une lettre, cette lettre. Et cette lettre était écrite par le père de Juliette. Donc, en réponse, le père de Roméo avait écrit cette lettre. Now, what do you think? What do you feel about Romeo's father? One word. Raisonnable. La vengeance. This word hasn't justified. He's justified. He's justified to be so possessif, protectif, soucieux, terrorisé. Right, vindicative, okay. Change. Now, so your feelings towards Romeo's father, I think, softened a bit when you saw that he had received a letter like this. So it's the same letter now. Let's go to the next one. Slide. Alors, c'est la même lettre, mais peut-être vous êtes fâché, peut-être vous êtes amusé, peut-être vous êtes triste, peut-être vous êtes soucieux, peut-être vous pensez qu'est-ce qui se passe. Donc, le texte ne change pas, mais vos sentiments changent. C'est comme ça que vous ouvrez votre esprit, que même sans provocation, you start feeling about this letter in a different way each time. And this is what we have to do as teachers in a classroom with the same piece of text. We have to make our students look at it from different perspectives, to see it from multiple sides, just like this, see it from multiple angles. And that is how one will open a mind towards other cultures, make it a more appropriate for plural. So when we talk of plural mindset, we are talking of a mindset that accepts multiple views simultaneously. And that is something we can do with simple language exercises in a classroom. We can do something else as well. This is just a starter. Pratiquer quelques adjectifs, c'est tout. On peut aussi faire quelque chose de différent. We can take this and we say, changer 10 mots de cette lettre afin qu'elle devienne une lettre écrite par le père de Juliette au père de Roméo. Now, I don't need you to use the chat boxes right now for this slide, but if I ask you to do that all you will do is, vous allez changer les féminins au masculin et les masculins au féminin. Votre fille devient votre fils, le sournoise devient sournois, et peut-être comme enseignant de langue, vous voulez pratiquer les adjectifs. Alors, pratiquez les adjectifs. Donc, vous commencez avec une petite activité ludique, voilà Roméo, voilà Juliette, mais puis c'est pour vraiment ouvrir leur esprit et puis vous passez à une activité de langue. Et voilà votre réponse. And what you can do is work with these, how adjectives change. Ville didn't change at all. Sournois, sournoise, innocent, innocente, same rule. Beau, belle, but amoureuse, désastreuse. So you can, this is an activity which does not have to be a pause café. It can be a full-fledged activity by itself that can be introduced. Donc, il y a deux objectifs ici. Enseigner la langue, oui, mais aussi apporter quelque chose en plus avec cette activité. And or, very simple, you can say, pratiquer les pronoms personnels. Votre, son, il, nous, notre, leur. Vous avez les objets directs, indirects, possessifs, pronoms personnels. You can use this in another way altogether. But there's one activity for which I would like you to do. Trouvez les mots qui peuvent blesser. When you received it, or most of you, not most, all of you, wrote words which were not nice, terrible, horrible, vengeance, etc., les mots négatifs. What were the words which hurt you? Just put in 2-3 words, not all. There were many that hurt you. Just put in one word if you want. Que sont les mots qui vous blessent? Which one made you react in that negative way? Vile, sournoise, esprit laid, oui. Conséquence, yes, conséquence is one of those words. You add something to it. Malheureusement, contre, averti is a strong word. Sournoise, vile, yes. These are the words, désastreuse. These are the negative words. But I would like to point out something else to you. Merci, merci pour vos réponses. Que, oui, ville, sournoise, apparemment, cache, laide, avertie, désastreux, conséquences. None of you mentioned votre, notre, vous. But what hurt you was not so much ville or sournoise. What hurt you was, it was a person. It came personally to you. Suppose I would say, you know, Dracula est vil et sournois. Il cache un esprit laid derrière son visage apparemment innocent. I don't think you would have been hurt. You wouldn't have reacted. Alors, les mots qui vous blessent le plus ici ne sont pas ces adjectifs. C'est le fait que ça vous blesse, ça vous touche. And it happens in life. I think I have been most hurt when somebody has said, this is the way we do things. And I felt, oh, I don't count in that we. I'm an outsider. Or someone has said, you people, etc. And I felt the maximum sense of rejection when I've heard you people from someone. Donc, les mots qui blessent ne sont pas simplement les adjectifs ou les mots péjoratifs, ça veut dire, ce sont aussi les pronoms personnels. Things we do on the first day. Le premier cours, on dit je, tu, il, elle, nous, vous, il, elle. Donc, ce sont les pluriels du pronom personnel. Nous, vous, il, elle. These are the most dangerous words. Les mots les plus dangereux. Et il faut que les apprenants soient conscients. And intercultural communication or culture, it's all about in-groups and out-groups. Who are the we, who are the they? And the moment we do the we and the they, il, elle, nous, il, elle, that's where the division begins. That's where the hurt begins. And that's where we can bring in these exercises right into language activity classes from A1. This full activity could be of a higher level, but je, tu, il, elle, nous, vous, il, elle can be in the first exercise itself. So I think we are in time. I'll close this now and I'll open it up for questions. Bijal, would that be all right?
Yes, ma'am. Is there anything else you would like to still add on to this entire thing, ma'am?
No, Bijal. I think there's a lot that have gone through. We can see what kind of questions come.
Great. Thank you so much, ma'am. I mean, along with the participants, even I got involved solving the questions and thinking of words. Thank you so much. Okay, we have many participants on Facebook Live. Welcome and thank you guys for participating. And we have a full house on Zoom as well. Guys, if you have any questions, those who are on Zoom, you can put your questions in the Q&A section. We request you to put on your questions in the Q&A section. And those who are on Facebook Live, if you have any questions related to the session, you can put it in the comment section. We'll take it up in just a few minutes. So, ma'am, before we move on to the Q&A section, I would like Philip to join us.
Bijal, I have forgotten something. Remember the two savez-vous slides?
Oh, yes.
I said I'll ask you a question later. I think I haven't mentioned that.
No, please go on, ma'am. We'll wait.
Yeah. Those were simple distractor slides, but they keep you interested. So in the middle of a class, it's nothing. I'll just go back to those slides. It's just a bit of information, that knowledge that you can bring in. You know, le 14 Mai, he became the president. You're just bringing in some knowledge about France. So, pendant les cours, vous pouvez dire que chaque cours, il y aura deux savez-vous, and it immediately gets attention. And you can, depending on your level, you say, quelle était la date 14 mai, ou quel âge? 39 ans. Or if we go into the earlier savez-vous, that's à Amsterdam, Qu'est-ce que ça veut dire, vocabulaire? What is a journal intime? What does this, what is it in English? So these are little aide-memoires, 30 seconds, just to hook people, get a bit of interest. That's all. Sorry, Vijay, back to you.
No, ma'am. In fact, this is a very interesting part. We all teachers, look for something very innovative way to hold the attention of our students. And especially with the scenario right now, we all taking online classes. Even while taking online classes, to catch on to the attention of our students, this is a very important thing which we can just flash a slide and say, you have to remember, I'm going to ask you certain questions at the end of it. So everyone is going to be attentive for this. Thank you so much. Okay, before I move on to Q&A, Philip, I would like to talk to you on this. You have traveled all across many countries, many cities. I would like to know, because one of our participants, in fact, has asked, would you have any tips for people or students who are traveling to a foreign land or maybe France for the first time, keeping the cultural part in mind? Like, for example, in India, we do namaste. In France, it's a different way of greeting. Would you give some tips to the people or students who are going to travel for the first time?
Thank you for your question, Bijal. It's a difficult one because there are so many tips I should give to an Indian student, for instance, who wants to go to France. But I wouldn't give tips, but I would give him or her piece of advice. I would tell her or tell him to be as open-minded as possible and to show curiosity and to put aside a little bit his or her own culture and try to be open to a new culture and new food, new way of addressing people, and of course, try to understand what is new, what is different in this particular culture compared to his own. That's what I would tell him.
Great. Thank you, Philip. And Philip, in continuation, we have one more participant who has asked a question. I think I throw this open to Dolon ma'am and you, both of you. Do you have any moments or incident that you remember, maybe a faux pas, or any funny incident that you have traveled to a particular country and gone wrong because maybe you were not aware of their culture of way of living, or something that has surprised you, an incident frappant? Dolon ma'am, Philip, I throw it open to both of you if you can think of any incident.
Philip, please go ahead.
Thank you. Of course, I worked in so many different countries, and I have plenty of memories of incidents like that. But I will choose one incident that didn't happen to me, but to one of my friends who was the former French ambassador to Japan. And one day, this ambassador organized a reception. It was before Christmas at the residence of France, and he invited Japanese families with their children. And one of the children ate Chinese porcelain, which was a very valuable one, and it fell down and it broke into pieces. And the first reaction of the ambassador was, of course, to show his discontent and to address the child and a little angry and tell him you should be more careful or something like that. And well, he was showing he was angry. And immediately he told me the adults, the Japanese persons that were around him, started laughing. And he couldn't understand why they started laughing at him. He was really embarrassed. And sometime later, one of his Japanese collaborators told him that you should understand it's normal in Japan, because since you are an ambassador, you shouldn't show your discontent to a child, even if he breaks something in your house. you should be above that. And yeah, and he told me that. And I think that's important even for an ambassador to get an intercultural education before being assigned abroad, and even for us too. And we have some kind of training, but usually it's not enough. Dolon?
Yes, I was thinking of one incident that I had witnessed. You know, it was in India, actually. I was working as an interpreter on the sets of a film, and it was a French production. So the people who were working on it were French, the designers and who worked on the sets, but the laborers were Indian, and I was the interpreter over there. So it was kind of go-between, and there was a plank that needed to be picked up from the floor and taken for the sets. So while telling me, the person told me, no, this plank needs to go there. And when he said that, he tapped the plank with his foot. Now, all he was showing me the plank. That was something as simple as that. But the laborers immediately struck work, saying, for us, we are carpenters. You know, wood is something which is our livelihood. We respect it. You can't show disrespect to us by pointing, touching things with your foot. Because in India, we don't touch people with our foot. You would have noticed, Philippe, I don't know whether you've noticed, your foot touches someone and an Indian does this. Mm-hmm. Because it's like, I've touched God, I'm sorry. You don't touch anyone with your foot. Now, for some of us who are familiar, we wouldn't mind. We know that there is no offense meant over here. You know, it was not meant to be. And even I did not take it so seriously. We touched it and I said, you know, just take this plank, put it there. And they kind of came back and said, we are not working. And they lost, and that company lost about half a day's work. It impacted the money because they struck work. They had to be cajoled and told, you know, he didn't mean a thing. He went and said sorry. And this poor gentleman was so embarrassed because he didn't mean to offend. Mm-hmm. So that is something I've seen, especially in intercultural interaction. Right. The biggest problem is we take offense when there was no offense meant, or we end up offending without meaning to offend. I mean, both had very good intentions, but communication broke down. So this is something I wanted to share, DJ.
Thank you. I'll just add a small thing with my experience when I traveled to France for the first time. I mean, it's almost, I think, before 10 or 12 years, not knowing much. As Philip, you'll agree, as for the French culture, you'll serve one thing at a time at the table. So I was in a family having my meal. So first they served aperitif, then it was some starters, salad. So obviously I was very new to this. So they placed salad on the table with some starters. So I thought that's it. That's the only thing on the table. So I ate as much as I could because I thought I have to fill my stomach because I have no food otherwise. So I ate the entire thing. And when everyone was done with salad, that bowl went inside and they got the main dish, le plat principal. And I was like, oh, I can't eat this anymore. But obviously I couldn't say no because they would have felt offended. So then I ate very little of it. After that, it was cheese. After that, it was dessert. After that, there was coffee. So that was my first experience that in India, we place everything at one go when we start the meal. But over there, it was, part by part. So now whenever I travel, I know I have to have very little of each serving. So that was my experience. Great. So Philip and Dolon ma'am, we have a few questions that our participants have asked. I'll throw open the questions to both of you, whosoever would like to take it up. We have a question from Usha. She is wanting to know, quelle sera la situation future interculturelle dans un monde virtuel? Quelle sera la situation future interculturelle dans un monde virtuel? Very interesting.
Philippe, est-ce que je peux répondre d'abord?
Bien sûr, bien sûr.
Parce que la première chose que je voudrais dire, c'est pas quelle sera, quelle est. Parce que c'est le monde virtuel. On habite un monde virtuel. Et si on commence à compter, si je dis que je connais 100 personnes qui ne sont pas indiennes, je dirais que je n'ai pas rencontré au moins 60. parce que mes interactions avec les 60 étaient virtuelles. Donc, c'est encore plus difficile. Et c'est comme ça que les bureaux fonctionnent. You know, in the offices, you have teams where there are people from different corners of the world and they're talking together and they have never met each other. And it becomes so important because you cannot see body language, you cannot see facial expression, you cannot read lips. You have to completely depend on your ear and you depend on language. It has to be sensitive, intercultural language. So in a monde virtuel, I mean, intercultural communication becomes there. You do not have an option. Go for a cup of coffee and solve the problem over a cup of coffee when you're face to face.
Right. Philip, would you like to add something to this?
Non, rien à ajouter. La réponse était parfaite.
Okay. We have Mr. Day with us on Facebook Live. He has put up a question. Could you please suggest how to help students to know more about intercultural aspects while teaching? So Dolon ma'am, you have already given few examples. Would you have something more? Because, you know, when you are treating students who are like quite young from 4th grade to 8th grade, any more intercultural activities, how do we incorporate it in our day-to-day teaching?
You know, I have just given examples and Bijal, tomorrow you'll be sharing those slides.
Right.
So these are just examples.
Right.
Any number can be brought out. With, suppose we're dealing with nationality. Take 60 nationalities, one characteristic of each nationality, and every day it can even be the savez-vous little thing that throw in savez-vous and so-and-so said this, so-and-so, and they have to remember. So connaissance, two types. One is knowledge and the other one is open your mind. So a few of connaissance initial level. Kids would love that game. And also give a little dilemma and say, was that all right? You know, asking that question. So-and-so said this, so-and-so said this, and he got angry. Why should he have been angry? Something like that. Bringing up, so first read up, know more cultures and throwing one small question every day.
Perfect. Thank you, ma'am. We have Angelina from Delhi. Her question is, comment encourager les apprenants de ne pas penser en anglais ou n'importe quelle langue pendant l'écriture en français, comme la plupart d'apprenants ne peuvent pas éviter à le faire? It's so relevant, and I think all teachers can relate to this question. Thanks, Angelina, for this question.
I think there are many teachers of French here, and I think their opinion is there. I mean, what I'm saying is just my opinion.
Right.
That is, you know, the moment people start seeing it's a different world. For example, you know, ask a person who's of French origin, you know, and the person will say, what's that? You know, just a few, maybe little body language things or little things to keep teaching that in the class. And ne pas penser en anglais, honestly, I don't know the answer. I wish I knew.
Great. Philip, would you like to add something?
Simplement, il faut qu'ils soient confrontés le plus souvent possible à la langue cible, au français. C'est comme ça qu'en écoutant beaucoup de français, en regardant des films ou des documentaires en français, c'est comme ça qu'ils vont progressivement réfléchir un petit peu en français. Utiliser le peu de français qu'ils possèdent pour former des phrases, donner des opinions, s'exprimer. Voilà. Et puis après, quand on devient beaucoup plus compétent dans une langue, peut-être ça arrive à Dolon, peut-être qu'elle rêve quelquefois en français. Je sais que ça m'est arrivé quelquefois de rêver en anglais à l'époque où j'étais dans un contexte anglophone.
Right. We take up the last question for the evening. The question is, we as teachers, now it's not about how to improve for the students, now it's improvement for the teachers. We as teachers, how can we learn more about the intercultural differences? So is it that only we Google and find out, or is there any other way, ma'am, you would suggest?
I will say, Bijal, when you send in the thing, I will add some links. Hofstede, I showed Hofstede. Okay. He has a country compare. It's a site, free website. One can go there, and there is a lot available. And Hofstede is very reliable. Otherwise, there's a lot available. And otherwise, there are licenses one can buy, and that they're not very expensive, called Aperian Global, Globe Smart. It's a very good tool to understand country culture. So I'll give both to you. You can include it in the mail that you sent.
Great, great. Okay, so there are a few more questions. So what we are going to do, dear participants, is we'll try to collate all the questions and all the relevant answers will be put it up. And we are going to share the presentation made by Philip as well as Dolon Gupta. And we are going to email it to all those who have registered. You'll receive the email tomorrow. And all the links that Dolon ma'am has just mentioned, we are going to add it up in our presentation that we send it to you tomorrow. Dolon ma'am, Philip, would you like to have any concluding remarks?
Écoutez, moi je suis impressionné par le fait qu'on a réuni beaucoup de participants. Donc, il y a, visiblement, c'est un sujet qui intéresse les professeurs de français en particulier, cette notion d'interculturel. On trouve également sur le site du Conseil de l'Europe aussi quelques références utiles pour cette approche interculturelle dans le domaine de l'éducation. Et voilà, donc je veux simplement maintenant vous remercier pour cette initiative vraiment très intéressante.
Thank you, Philip. Dolon ma'am, over to you.
Je voudrais remercier les participants, je voudrais remercier Indo French Hub and Institut Français. Merci beaucoup. I had a very nice Sunday afternoon.
Thank you so much. A great big thank you to all our participants on Zoom Live, as well as we have around more than 60-70 participants on Facebook Live. To just name a few, we have Reena, we have Anisha, we have Sonal, Ruma, many from all across. Thank you so much. And without your participation and involvement, we wouldn't have had this great response. And it was quite interactive. Dolon ma'am, I would like to thank you for involving our participants, because everyone was just glued to the screen to type the answers, be it on Facebook or Zoom chat window. Thank you so much, because you kept us on toes this Sunday afternoon and we did not sleep. Thank you so much. And we'll connect with everyone tomorrow by email, and we'll be announcing our next webinar for next Sunday tomorrow itself. Thank you so much, and we end our session over here. Thank you, Philip. Thank you, Dolon ma'am. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Bijal.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Hmm.